As the world around him blends memories, magic, and reality, Atma is dumbfounded throughout his adventure in A Space for the Unbound. This is the newest adventure game from the publisher that brought you Coffee Talk, another riveting visual novel cross-adventure game. A Space for the Unbound circumvents expectations in ways that are powerful and arguably might be a bit too much for some. Without a doubt, it's one of the few games that tackles some heavy subjects in ways I haven't seen another video game do so before. Forgive me for being vague about its story and themes, because a lot of the biggest beats with this title are in its story and your reaction to the things in the story. So here's what I can say about A Space for the Unbound. You play as Atma, an Indonesian teenager that wakes up in the middle of class to find his girlfriend, Raya. He swears he just had the most vivid dream, but quickly comes to terms with he must have imagined it. Anyway, back in reality, he and Raya make a charming duo. Raya is sweet and upbeat, while Atma is kind and a bit goofy. The two find themselves in an everyday slice of life routine in the middle of this Indonesian town. That means going to the movies, feeding the stray cats, and occasionally ditching class. All of these make for a charming, albeit at times a painfully slow introduction to the rest of the game. When the pace does start to pick up, you'll quickly come to realize there's a lot more to Atma, this town, and everything around him. It's a story that dives into serious topics that might not be for everyone. There is obviously a reason why the game features trigger warnings for depictions of anxiety, depression, and other things. Even when it does tackle it though, it does it gracefully in a way that makes it one of the most memorable written stories I've had the pleasure of experiencing, and I think that's why it's worth playing. For its roughly 10-hour playtime, you'll control Atma throughout this 2D side-scrolling depiction of a small town in Indonesia. You venture throughout town, talking to NPCs, and collect information and objects to later solve puzzles and objectives. For the first hour or so of the game, that primarily comes in the form of fetch quest. For example, you need to collect these 3 items to solve this one objective, only to get another fetch quest at the end of it. It was admittedly a little tiring and heavy-handed, but shortly after, the game started to introduce more of its story and mechanics. One of these features is Atma's magic red book that gives him the ability to space dive. It's a magical skill that lets him dive into the mind of someone else. Inside their minds, Atma is able to solve puzzles to reveal a clue in the real world or reveal a hidden secret. This is where A Space for the Unbound shines the most, constantly surprising me by where it took me. Additional side quests provided some extra challenges and content, like collecting all the bottle caps around town and petting every stray cat that you come across. As you progress further, Atma will find new abilities that further elaborate on the magic side of the story. With this magic angle, A Space for the Unbound finds one of the most profound ways to tackle the most taboo social topics in video games, and it's all the more magical for it. A Space for the Unbound uses a pixel art style that is some of the best I've seen in recent times. The artwork uses a nice contrast of vibrant colors with subtle animation. Objects have shadows that give them more depth, like the leaves and trees, or the shadows being cast by the background elements. That's just speaking about the typical gameplay that has a 2D plane side-scroller presentation. However, there are instances where the game will switch to a more detailed first-person shot that looks equally as good. There's no shortage of indie games that use a pixel art style, so the fact that this looks good among the saturated visual art style really speaks to its quality. The title is available on PS4, Xbox, PC, and Nintendo Switch, and thanks to the relatively low performance requirements, the game runs beautifully on just about all of them. I preferred to play on my Steam Deck or my Nintendo Switch, mostly for the portability, and naturally, games that require a lot of reading tend to feel better on a handheld device. Playing on an OLED Switch helped make the colors pop, while playing on my Steam Deck let me easily switch between playing my save on my desktop and my Steam Deck. A Space for the Unbound features a charming selection of music that captures the vibe of a slice-of-life adventure. Bells, chimes, and pianos encompass a lot of the tracks that play behind the everyday city life. That's not the only type of music though. Some later tracks like Chasing the Truth pick up the pace with some Ace Attorney-like vibes. They're really good and catchy. There are even clever sound design choices like the music switching from major to minor when you're conducting a stealth mission early on in the game. For the about 10-hour playthrough, A Space for the Unbound will take you on a heartfelt, emotional, and heavy journey that's bound to leave a big impression on anyone that plays it. While I enjoyed my time playing it, I admit the latter half of the game is much better paced than the first half. The introduction can admittedly feel like it's going nowhere, with plenty of fetch quests at a dreadfully slow pace. However, once you get past the roughly 1 to 1.5 hour introduction, the game starts to show its true colors. Sometimes it's cozy, sometimes it's heartwarming, and sometimes it's the saddest thing I've seen all day. But at all times, it was remarkable, and I highly recommend playing it if you can handle it.